Okay. We are here once again, as we are every Sunday at 11:30 California time. And let's see what we got going today. So we wait for people to get in here. Let's see. So some interesting comments recently. Not a whole lot to talk about, I don't think. Let's see. So I still haven't had a whole lot of time to make stuff. I've been working a lot. Yesterday I worked almost 12 hours. So not much time. But let's see here. So another person thanking me for the ELSA review because they couldn't get a score any higher than 87% and they were losing their confidence. So if a native has difficulty getting 100%, then needs to be improved. Of course, it's been a while since I made that video, so maybe they've improved it since then. Let's see here. Still nobody in here yet. One person talking a bit about the R sounds and transcriptions and stuff, and a bunch of what, in my opinion, is kind of useless information for the average learner. But it's okay. Let's see. Got a couple people in here. It says there are 3 people. It didn't tell me who. So feel free to say hi, ask some questions. Let me know you're here. Dismiss. Okie dokie. Oh, a whole lot to start off with. Days are just kind of a blur at this point. I'm working like 10 to 12 hours a day. Sometimes I have classes. Classes are slow right now, so I mean, still trying to work on the mouth posture course, but with classes being so slow, it's kind of hard to make progress. And then a lot of people who start it end up just disappearing, so it's kind of frustrating. But it is what it is. I have 1 or 2 very high level people who only have a very, very, very small problem with their accent. And I'm testing some things for high level people like that with targeting certain things, building the foundation, and going from there. That seems to be coming along decently so far. King Lion is here. Welcome, welcome. How are you? I am pretty good, I guess. This week has been crazy, we'll say. As I mentioned a minute ago, I don't know if you're in here yet, but yesterday I worked almost 12 hours. And this whole week, I mean, classes have been slow, so some days I'll have like 1 or 2 classes. If you don't count the classes, I'm working at least 9 to 10 hours a day. So, and then if I have some classes, it usually bumps up to about 12. So I basically sleep and work, trying to eat as well. But yeah, it's pretty tough. But things are pretty good. I'm not dead yet. So, Miguel, welcome, Miguel. I know a lot of words, phrasal verbs, slangs. So slang, I hear Spanish speakers, not just a lot of English learners, but Spanish speakers in particular, because I'm more familiar with Spanish. I've talked to more Spanish speakers since I speak Spanish. Slangs, to me, to make slang plural sounds weird. I don't know if there are any natives who do that. Um, Occasionally, you might hear me make it plural only because I've heard it so much from Spanish speakers, um, in like language exchanges and stuff. But it feels kind of weird. So I think slang is always supposed to be singular. Yeah, singular. So we would say, just like we say a piece of paper, you could say some slang words, some slang phrases. So it's more like an adjective, not a noun. I don't know what the dictionary says about that. I know this is not what you posted about, but here we are. Slang. Okay, so it can be used as a noun. Um, Doesn't say anything about singular or plural. Um, doesn't even list it as an adjective. That's weird. Anyway, whatever. Doesn't matter. Point is, I don't recommend using slangs as a plural. Just like say slang. Well, I guess if you're using it like this, if you're not saying slang words, if you just say I know slang, then that would be a noun. Yeah. So there you go. Just don't make it plural. But anyway, I know lots of words, phrasal verbs, and slang, but I can't speak it nor hear it. How can I improve that? Another little side note here. So nor is a word that we use. It does exist. Um, but it, even though it's taught as proper grammar, we much more often use don't use we more often than not don't use nor. So if you say I can't speak it or hear it, technically speaking, that is a different meaning than I can't speak it nor hear it. But nor is a word that is kind of disappearing, I think. Um, it is used, it is still around, especially in formal writing, even in speech, yes. But what we would probably just say is or, and just based on the context, we'll understand the meaning. Um, so or is sort of like replacing, so it'll be like the positive and the negative. Um, Kind of like with neither and either. So like I don't like it either. So we'll say don't plus either instead of I like it neither. But there are certain structures like neither nor exists or me neither. We all say me either, even though that's technically wrong, but it's becoming normal. So the neither nor thing is sort of in a gray zone where it's like it's kind of disappearing, but it still exists. And you don't have to completely uh, try not to use it, but just know that we don't use it more often than we do use it. How can you improve that? Well, the only way to really improve your speaking skills, there's little tricks and there's little things, and shadowing can help. But at the end of the day, the only real way to improve your speaking is to speak. That's it. And you have to speak a lot. This doesn't mean, oh, I had a 1 hour class or a 1 hour language exchange this week, and that's all the speaking I did. That's not going to be enough. You need to speak and speak and speak and speak. There are techniques for speaking to yourself. You don't necessarily have to have somebody to speak to, although that is ideal. Um, Working with language exchange partners, like if you can't afford a teacher or whatever to just give you time to talk and maybe some feedback, you can find language exchange partners for free on italki. All of my Spanish is like all my Spanish speaking skills were developed through language exchange, 100%. So yeah. Now, if you can't hear it, so this is actually a perfect example. So we have, okay, you say, I know, right? That's knowledge. So you know words, you know phrasal verbs, you know slang. So you have knowledge, right? You also have knowledge of grammar, right? Knowledge is not skill. Okay. Knowledge is not skill. Put another way, knowledge is not experience. Right? I think that's actually a more profound, direct way that it kind of clicks better. Instead of saying knowledge is not skill, knowledge is not experience. Okay. So um, your listening improves through listening a lot. Yeah, you can read, that'll help, but it's primarily listening. Speaking is improved primarily through speaking. So you have to listen a lot and speak a lot. This is a very common problem that many English learners, but many language learners in general have the problem with, because what are the traditional ways that you are taught? Well, here's some grammar, here's some words, here's some more grammar, here's some more words. Maybe there's a couple listening activities. Maybe, if you're lucky, you'll get a little bit of speaking practice. Um, Things these days are supposed to be much more communicative, which is better, but that has its own problems as well. My personal recommendation is pronunciation and ear training. Pronunciation and ear training, because uh, hearing is the basis of everything. But what's the basis of hearing? Sounds. I mean, there's the sound, the stress, the rhythm, all that stuff, but sounds, right? If you can't hear the difference between e and and a, then number one, it's going to be harder, because if you learn, okay, there's bed and bad, and maybe you get them confused because it's hard for you to hear the difference. And so you always mix them up. Well, if you could hear the difference from the beginning because you trained your ears, then you're going to be able to remember the words a lot better. So it's not just to improve your listening, it also helps your vocabulary. It helps pretty much everything. The foundation of spoken language is sound. So if you don't train your ears, and depending on how good of an accent you want, train your mouth, um, you're going to have a much, much more difficult time learning the language, even the knowledge part of the language. Plus, on top of that, right, you go and you learn all these words and grammar, and you can recognize them maybe if you read them. But if you can't recognize them when you hear them and you can't use them, then they're useless, right? Unless you just want to read the language, then if that's your goal, you're fine. So you need to line up your activities with your goals. If your goal is to be able to speak, well, there's your solution. You need to speak. It's not like I. It's one of those things that's like it's so obvious that everybody misses it. Right. And we get so caught in like learning more, learning more, learning more, but knowledge is not skill. Knowledge is not experience. So go speak more. For hearing, the best little trick or hack that I have for that, which I personally used myself, I accidentally discovered it. And then later I found other people talking about it, some polyglots and stuff. Find a TV series that you really, really like. If you don't know if you like it, that's fine. But, pick something that you normally like to watch in your native language. Maybe it's a show about cars, maybe it's a science fiction show, whatever, it doesn't matter. Pick something that you would normally watch in your language. Find something that is similar in English. Make sure that has multiple seasons. Movies don't count. Make sure it has multiple seasons, at least 3. Watch the first season with subtitles optionally. You don't have to, but I do recommend it, because especially if you can't hear everything very well yet, but most especially in your case, if you can understand it when you read it, doing the first season with subtitles helps you really get into the story, get attached to the characters, so you understand what's going on. And then in the next couple seasons, um, even if you really like the show, even if you don't have subtitles, you will still want to watch it. Right, because you wanna see what happens, you're attached to the characters, and so then you have to make sure. In my case, I got lucky because I accidentally discovered it. I was watching a show in Spanish, with subtitles. I was studying it, but the method I was using was just too too much, and so I just decided I just wanted to watch it with subtitles, English subtitles, and just whatever, I didn't care anymore. But the next couple seasons, I could only find the raw format, so I couldn't find it with subtitles, basically no Spanish subtitles, no English subtitles. So I had to choose, either I stop watching the show or I just watch it and try to figure out what's going on based on what I know about the story so far and what I see, what I hear. I could only understand maybe 30 or 40%, maybe 50% at the most at that time. And it was in Spain Spanish, which is largely the same. There's not too much variation among Spanish accents. But I wasn't I had never really focused on Spanish, Castellano, up to that point. So that was an extra difficulty on top of it that was messing with my listening. And that's all you got to do. First season, subtitles, get into the story. The rest of the show, all the other seasons, do not use subtitles. Force yourself not to use subtitles. It'll be hard, it'll be uncomfortable, but by the time you finish that, you should notice, it might not happen immediately, but after you finish the series and then maybe you give it a couple days or so, um, you're going to notice just a huge improvement to your listening. It's not going to be perfect. Now, you're not going to magically understand everything, but I noticed a huge increase in my listening after I did that. And then I repeated that again later with another series and I saw another increase. Not as big because I already understood more at that point, but it worked again. So do that for your listening and go speak. Speak, 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 speak. Alan is here. Welcome, welcome. Understand. Well, here, understand it. Okay, either way. Understand would cover listening and reading. So, I mean, I assume that you can understand it through reading because otherwise you probably wouldn't know it at all, right? That's probably related to my work schedule. Yeah. I have a question. Since I sound uncontrolled, can I fix it by overpronouncing words? Overpronunciation is a double-edged sword. It's a phrase we have, a double-edged sword, which means that kind of like no matter what you do, like there's a good thing and a bad thing. So it'll help you cut, but it'll also cut you, right? As a form of practice, overpronunciation can be useful when used properly at the right times. Depends on your goals. But using overpronunciation or just like complete enunciation as the normal default of your speech, you will probably sound worse. Okay. See, because if you sound uncontrolled and you overpronounce everything, you're just going to sound more clearly uncontrolled. Because if you can't control things normally, how are you going to control things when you try to do them more fully, right? Now, that being said, right, so there's the lazy pronunciation, there's the full, I mean, it's practice. Yeah, there's the lazy pronunciation of things, there's the full pronunciation of things. We tend to dip into the full as we need it, the enunciated version. Yeah, I mean, if you use it as a practice tool, it can potentially help. But I would think that there are bigger problems there. Like, for example, actually, so as I'm trying to build in these last few pieces into my Spanish posture, I am finding it. I mean, again, it's not like I sit down practice, all the time. I just kind of like I do it as I'm driving and I sing, Spanish sometimes, not even all day, maybe like not even an hour a day, right? So it's not like I'm hardcore practicing this, but when I do, try to work in these pieces like the front of the tongue and trying to anchor things and whatever, I find it almost impossible to get the sides of my tongue to not be pushed out and touching the top of the teeth because that's the English anchor. And because in Spanish, like I'm able to mimic like 99% of the Spanish sounds really, really, really well, but I have the American posture, and that's that little percentage off that is ruining my pronunciation. So I sound near native, but not not quite enough. Any native would be like, there's something there. I don't know what it is. Except for my R, because my R still needs a little bit of work. But that aside, the reason I'm mentioning this is because trying to get like some more tension on the front, trying to hold my tongue forward and trying not to make sure that the sides of my tongue aren't like out and up. I've already built in that way of pronouncing things. Like I hold the English posture. So when I make certain sounds in Spanish, that's always been my anchor. It's just my normal English anchor. And so trying to make the sounds while creating a different anchor is like I can maybe get into it. I can maybe hold it for a sound or two, or maybe for like a word. But then without even realizing it, the sides of my tongue are out, and the next thing I know, I'm like, "Wait, when did that happen?" I didn't even realize that happened. Um, like, I can't even drive and do it at the same time because it requires so much, concentration for me to just, like, try to hold it in place. So, um, if I'm trying to use the full Spanish posture, um, right now, I sound very uncontrolled. It sounds kinda like this, like my mouth is full, like this is something kinda in it's like I sound really weird, 'cause I'm trying to do 2 postures at the same time, because I can't get rid of the English one. So, I would ultimately go back to posture. Um, but, that aside, I mean, maybe there's certain sounds or certain whatever, flow of speech shadowing might help, but yeah, I mean, you can throw in over pronunciation, as a practice tool. Just make sure you're not doing that all the time. Make sure that, it's not part of your regular speech. Uh, read a book in loud voice for 1 hour can help me improve my speaking, but not my listening. I very strongly recommend against that. Reading out loud can help certain things in certain ways. There are people who recommend reading aloud. I personally don't, for a couple reasons. Number one, in English, we have, and this is probably true in other languages too. I don't know, but I know for a fact in English, we have a different, like if we're reading something, we don't speak the same way that we normally do, right? We have a reading intonation. Um, and there's a certain way that we flow as we're reading. It's not like completely different than the spoken language, but like you can, like if you just give me a clip of somebody who's reading, I will most likely, like almost guaranteed, I'll be able to tell that they're reading, even though I can't see them. I'm just listening to them. So even if, say, your pronunciation was perfect, because you're also going to be reinforcing like the bad pronunciation. If you're reading for an hour out loud, you're just like reinforcing bad habits. So that's another reason I don't recommend it. But even if like your pronunciation was decent or you didn't really care about that, um, and you're like reading out loud, reading out loud, reading out loud, best case scenario, when you go to speak, you're just going to sound like you're reading. um, and plus, the other thing is that people don't realize this. There's an input output loop, okay, that the brain uses. If you're familiar with programming, this will make a lot of sense. If you're not, it doesn't matter too much. But every skill has an input output loop, and it depends on what skill we're talking about and what the thing you're doing. So in language, we have two input output loops. We have speaking and listening. So listening goes in through the ears. It's your physical device, your input mechanism. Sounds come in your ears, your brain processes that, and then speech, your mouth is the organ that produces the language. All sound based, 100% sound based, in the ears, out the mouth. The written language is visual based. So it goes in through your eyes and it goes out if you're writing through your hands, right? Or if you're typing, same thing through your hands. So that is a completely different input output loop. And yes, reading a lot can help your speaking. It can help grow your vocabulary, right? All these things are connected, right? Because there's the spoken language, the written language. It's all the same language essentially. Um, so it's not like, oh, if you're trying to improve your speaking, you shouldn't do this, right, or whatever. But at the same time, like for example, there are people who learn how to play the guitar. They're classically trained, which means that they learn how to read sheet music, right? So they can read the notes and all this stuff, and they get really good at that, and they can play really, really well. But then you take the sheet music away and you say, okay, play something. It's There's a very good chance that they're not really going to be able to play it, right? And there's probably people who have different experience here. I don't want to make a blanket statement about this, but that's been shown to happen because what happened? You broke the input output loop because they weren't focusing on their ears, which when you're learning music, just like language, you should probably focus at least somewhat on your ears. So that would be the equivalent in English of learning how to read. So you're going in through your eyes and then speaking, which means you won't be able to understand what you hear, but you can speak the language. And it's this broken input output pair. You're mixing two pairs. And so again, although yes, they're all interconnected, I don't want to make it black and white and say, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, um, you have to be aware of the reality of this and how the way that you're doing certain things can have a positive or negative impact on what you're trying to do. So your goal is to improve speaking. You're trying to find a way to do that. Okay, can I read a book out loud for 1 hour? You are speaking. But here's the thing, speaking is spontaneous. If you're reading, you're not being spontaneous. You're taking input and you're just saying it. You're just forming it into sounds. That's all you're doing. You're not actually speaking in the way that I'm speaking, where I have thoughts that are being formed and they're coming out through my mouth and sound, right? Um, so even though you would be mechanically, physically practicing speaking, and that does help, that's why just speaking to yourself also helps because you're practicing the mechanical act of speaking. At the same time, you're training your brain to rely on visual input in order to be able to produce the language. And if you remove that visual input, you'll probably notice that your speaking skills go down. Now, let's say that's like the only thing you do, right? If you do other things to help improve your speaking, this maybe can be one activity that you do. I wouldn't do it for an hour for sure, like maybe 15 minutes at the most. Um, but it definitely should not be a main or definitely not an only thing that you do because you're gonna I can almost guarantee that you're gonna end up with a result that you don't want. Okay, Alan, when you pronounce dark L, are the sides of the tongue down? No. So the thing about the L, what I've noticed, oh, la, la, la. So there's the dark L and the light L. I call the full L consonant the half L vowel sound. So we have this anchor on the side where like the sides of the tongue are up. We're touching the top teeth. What I've noticed, because I've played with it a bit, the full L, the light L, the tongue seems to narrow. It's like the only sound I think that we do that with, as far as I've noticed. And so it'll kind of pull in from that anchor. But I've noticed it's possible to pronounce the full L. I'm using the full L first because they're connected. It's a range of one sound. But I notice when I do the full L, I can pull it all the way in and not feel the teeth at all, like top or bottom, as I place the L where it goes, and that'll give a nice, good, clear full L sound, light L. But I notice that it's also possible to let the sides be like they're still pulled in, and they're maybe a little higher, but I don't have to pull them all the way in, where I can like still very lightly feel the top teeth, and it'll still work just fine. Um, so there's definitely some pulling in, like it's not going to be like it normally is, sort of more like pushed out. So the L is definitely a bit special. Now for the dark L or the half L vowel, oh, 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 there's a little bit of a range on exactly how we can do it. I'm trying to feel the anchor. All, eel, kill, wheel, sell, sell, sold, oh. So it does feel to me like I can still feel the top teeth very, very lightly, but it does feel like right in here because the tongue is being pushed back and slightly down in the middle. Um, it's sort of it'll get lighter than it does, especially right in here. So the way I'm dividing the anchor, there's like the front of the middle, like the front half of the middle. Instead of doing threes, we're going to do halves. So there's like the front half of the middle, the back half of the middle, and then the back of the tongue, as far as like it would anchor along the top teeth. Depending on what sound you're doing, usually it'll kind of come off as like a zipper, like we're doing ah, whatever. This will tend to stay more in contact than this. Like this comes off first usually, but it depends on the sound you're doing. If I do the dark L, which I haven't explored too much with the posture yet because nobody's gotten to that sound, um, it feels to me like this has a little bit lighter contact than normal. This has normal contact, but then like this part, the back half of the middle, I can feel it become very, very, very light, which is a little bit weird actually, but that's how it feels. Oh, 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 oh. All. And then, of course, if I'm doing like all, ill, l, if I'm, uh, depending on the exact combination I'm doing, there might be some other, little details going on, depending on how clearly I'm enunciating it, especially if it's like an L colored, like all, L, O, like even L, 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 I can kind of like almost completely break that anchor. So it depends on how clearly you're speaking as well. But in general, I would say that there's still some contact there. So are the sides of the tongue down? I would say no. Um, Maybe very slightly, but it's pretty much normal. Um, Now, as I explore that more later, maybe I'll have some more information or some details about that. But just playing with it right now, that would be my answer. Frizina, Sarah, welcome. Could you? I was gonna say can. Could you teach us the vowel? Typo there. Vowel. O in orange, please. What type of O is that? Okay. So the way that this is normally taught, this would be like an R colored aw, which in IPA is like a backward C symbol. But because I teach you guys the cot merger, which is becoming the standard across the United States, um, and is the way that I naturally speak, there is no aw anymore. Okay, there's not ah and aw, there's just ah. It's just one sound that moved to the back of the tongue, down and back. Uh, so then what happens with the O? Because if he's like orange and you don't have the cot merger, you say like orange, 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 something like that. Or forest, forest. Okay. Which to me sounds very, very strange. But plenty of people still speak that way. So what happens if you do have the merger is that you end up getting what I call the R colored O. Okay. So it's just an O. Now, the thing about the O is that I also the way that that's the way that that is standardly taught is it's aw, which is that unmerged sound again. It's like a diphthong that ends in like in book. You don't have to do it that way. You do not have to do it that way. The way that I teach it, in my O lesson, I teach it as a monophthong, and you focus on mostly rounding the lips, maybe loosening up the tongue a bit, and that works really, really well. But the way that I'm teaching it now, especially with the mouth posture, is you're actually going to start if you go to the center of gravity, if you can do that, and then you start just a little bit behind it, so you're not like fully there, but it's going to sound almost exactly the same, like instead of and then you just sort of go back up to where that aw would be more or less, maybe a little higher, and then bring the lips around. Oh, oh, oh. So you don't have to go like aw, you can go like and then to where the O would be. Um, so it actually goes like this. Either way, we have this sort of like round like motion. It's like sort of like a wave in the mouth. One goes from this way it's standardly taught goes this way. The way I teach it goes this way. And the lips coming around is very, very important. So if you take that, whether you do the O the way it's normally taught as a diphthong or not, you do it the way that I teach you. Either way, especially if you do it the way I teach you, it's probably gonna be the easiest way. And then you just R color that. So you go from that into an or so oh, 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 oh. So my tongue is already, if I'm gonna R color it, instead of starting a little outside of the center of gravity, sounding more like an sound, it's actually going to be sort of like blended between and so it's not like a fully formed so if I say or see, it's already like starting to form that while we have that o going, and that, in my experience, it can be a little tricky to get, but it tends to be a much easier way for English learners to do it. The real problem is the R part, because that's a big problem, just forming a regular R, let alone combining it with some other sound. So that would be what I have to say about that. I have a second question. Could you tell us some words about present perfect when to use it. The problem is so learnt, we need an N there, but learnt is a form of learn. It's the past tense form of learn that Americans don't really use anymore. So we spell it ed. We don't use the T spelling, Learned. And I think British people still say learnt. Some Americans might say learnt, but generally Americans say learned with a D sound. Anyway, the problem is we learned it as a past tense, but it turned out it's a present tense. Lots of typos. That's okay. So the present perfect, the perfect tenses are a big rabbit hole. I've talked about them before. Things are kind of stacking up here and I'm falling behind, so I don't want to spend too much time here. But for the most part, the biggest thing, there are two big things that you have to understand about the present perfect. I'm not going to go into all the details. I'll have lessons on that later. The two big things you need to learn to know is, number one, what the nature of the present perfect is, and number two, how often do Americans use it. So number one, the nature of the present perfect, it's not that it's a past tense and it's not that it's a present tense. It's tied to the present, but it's both. You have a foot in both. Okay. So if I say I have been to Japan, okay, which I haven't, but let's say I have. So I went to Japan at one point. Went, simple past, right? There's an event in the past. I went to Japan. Bam. Now I'm still alive. I still have that experience. This is one of the uses of the present perfect, to show that we, have experienced something in the past. And so because I'm still alive and because I still have that experience continues with me into the present, right? That's a really abstract use of the present perfect, but it's the same basic structure of why it's used. Something happened in the past, and even though I'm not still in Japan now, that experience continues into the present, and so there's this link between the present and the past. Okay. Another use of the present perfect, which is maybe a little simpler, is if I say, like, I have already well, I guess that would be too similar. Trying to think of one of the other examples. Okay, so if I say, like, okay, you have like a kid and a parent. Parent says, "Did you do your homework?" Which, that's a very American thing. Many British people and Americans also, but that comes to the second point of the present perfect. Let's keep it present perfect to keep it simple. Have you done your homework? And the kid says, right, yes, I have done my homework. Okay, so there's, say the homework was done, I don't know, an hour ago. Okay, so kid's doing homework. An hour later, parent asks, have you done your homework? Okay, so an hour ago, the homework was finished. We're now in the present. The homework is done, right? So I have done it. I have done something. So it shows that there's something in the past that's connected to the present. Now, if you shift both of those points, the past point and the present point, into the past, you get the past perfect, right? So when my mom asked me, I had already done my homework. Okay, so they're both in the past. We don't have to worry about that right now. But that's all we do. We just shift it. So in the past perfect, both points are in the past. We're showing which one happened first using the past perfect. Present perfect, one is in the past, one is in the present. And the present perfect shows that there's some relationship between that past and the present. Instead of just talking about an isolated past event, like I did my homework an hour ago, I went to Japan last year, whatever. And then if we use the future perfect, both things are in the future. So that's all we're doing is we have 2 points in time and we're just shifting how we're talking about that. That's all the perfect does. It's not. It has different uses and stuff, right? These different tenses, that makes it a little complicated, but the basic concept is not that complicated. I think the way that it's taught is maybe a bit too complicated, but it's not something that's super easy to teach either. So that's fair. Anyway, that's the first thing. That's the nature of the present perfect. The second thing you have to learn is how often do Americans use it. There are times when you have to use the present perfect because the simple past means something different. So when I say I have been to Japan, that is a completely different meaning than saying I went to Japan. Okay. But like I used with the parents, or with the parent example, if the parent says, have you done your homework? Right. Yes, I have. Okay. That works perfectly fine in American English. But if the difference in meaning based on the context between the present perfect and the simple past is so small that it doesn't really make much of an actual real difference in reality, Americans will tend to use the simple past. Doesn't mean we can't use the present perfect if it works grammatically, but we tend to like to use the simple past. This also goes for the past perfect because usually we know which thing happened first based on the context or other elements of the sentence. So instead of saying "Have you done your homework?" you're probably much more commonly going to hear an American parent say, "Did you do your homework?" Okay. Now, grammatically, technically speaking, that is a little bit of a different meaning, but if the context is clear, which it usually is, it doesn't matter. Um, so you don't have to worry about the perfect tenses too much. Okay. The tricky part is sort of realizing when you have to use it and when you don't have to use it. So what I would do is get in the habit of like asking yourself, if I use the present perfect, does this make a very big, clearly different meaning than the simple past? And that may be tricky sometimes, but that's the big question to ask. If there's not that much of a difference in the meaning, then you can probably just use the simple past instead. It takes some practice, takes some getting used to, um, but it makes it, once you can get through that, it makes it more accessible. And pay attention, listen to how Americans speak, and you'll start to kind of develop a feeling for it. Like, oh, I would expect based on the grammar that you should use the present perfect here, but this American used the simple past. Now, keep in mind, maybe you could be wrong. Maybe it's supposed to be the simple past, but most likely it's going to be a case where they would both work and the American is just choosing to use the simple past. So input, always very important. Okay. Also keep in mind in writing, the perfect tenses are used much more correctly usually. Like if you're reading a book or um, something like that, then or a news article. It depends on the tone, but it's going to be a little bit more common to use them correctly in writing. Correctly, right? Thank you so much. I don't know whether I must call you teacher or not. That's okay. I don't care. Some people call me teacher. Some people call me Mister, Sir, Josh. Doesn't matter. I don't care. Third one. I've heard that Americans don't use exclamation mark very rarely because it. So, okay, so you said don't and then rarely. So that would mean that we use it a lot because the negative would cancel the rare, make it the opposite meaning, right? So I've heard that Americans use the exclamation mark very rarely because it is like shouting or something. Is it true? When do you usually use the exclamation mark? There might be something to that. I mean, we use it when we need to use it. The point of it, right? It's like there's a period with a thing, so it like a line on top, and it makes the period stronger, right? So yeah, it depending on what kind of tone you're trying to give, or what kind of, like, especially if you're like texting somebody and you put an exclamation part, like you want to say part exclamation mark, it's going to affect how it's read for sure. Um, but I don't know if there's any truth to this. We use it when we need to use it to make it stronger in writing. Because if I'm speaking to you and I say, "Is that really true?" Right? It might be like exclamation point question mark, right? Because you're not supposed to use them both, I don't think. But it matches speech. Um, but technically, I think if you say do it, like if you give a command, you're supposed to write an exclamation point, even if you're not angry about it. Um, at least that's what I was taught. So, but it's like a lot of the time we don't even do that. We'll just put a period and we'll use the exclamation to make it stronger. So it sounds like we're shouting like do it, right? Instead of do it. So just use it when you want the person to read what you wrote in a stronger way. Just keep it simple. I think that's generally how we use it anyway. So Douglas is welcome, or Douglas. I cannot speak today, as always. My brain is not for speech. Douglas is here. Welcome. There we go. Speaking in pronunciation, to me the hardest. So speaking of pronunciation, the hardest. I think I'm pretty sure that's what you mean. To me, the hardest pronunciation in English is final D with other consonants, because T we can stop the sound in our throat, but this doesn't occur with D, so I can't do it fast. Well, you can do it fast, but obviously there's going to be you can't do it as fast, but you can still do it very fast. Like, remember that the T can stop in the throat, or it can stop in the T position, because the D also stops in the D position. All the other stops have to stop in that position. If you have a vowel before it and then the next word starts with the vowel, of course you can flap D. That's what we usually do, right? So if I say bad R, bad R, bad R, or whatever. But if you want to stop it, so like if we say bat, okay, so I don't have to bring my tongue up. I could just close here, bat, fine. But if it's a D and I say bad, 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 I just have to close up all the way, and then I still close everything off. You make sure the voice comes through a little bit. You don't drop the voice before you close, and there's really not too much of a difference to it. So, but I understand it can be tricky. If you can get the glottal stop T, that's the hardest part. Doing the like actually going into the tier D position and stopping it shouldn't be that difficult, but I know, different people have different problems. So that's okay, right? It's fine. But usually we would expect that getting control of the glottis would be the hard part. So if you can do that part, like a lot of the time, like, because remember with the T, in order to speak truly fast, the T at the end, it'll usually do one of two things, right? Because very rarely do we actually push that T out. It'll either do one of two things. Number one, it'll turn into a flat D if it can, right? Or maybe some kind of D, depending on what's behind it. But it'll turn into a flap D. If it can't turn into a flap D, or even sometimes if it can turn into a flap D, we just drop it, right? If you see T at the end of a word, the most common thing to do is probably to drop it. Now it depends. Can't necessarily always do that. Depends on what's after it. But it's a common thing. And so that, right, instead of taking the time to stop it, if conditions are right, which more often than not they probably will be, you can just drop the T. So that's even faster than trying to pronounce anything. Now that you cannot do with the D, right? You can't just randomly drop Ds. There are Ds where maybe we can drop them sometimes, depending, but much less common than with the T. So just practice. Okay. Sorry, I mean, I've heard exclamations. Yeah, so there's that correction. Yeah, sorry. I didn't get there. Here we use the symbol all the time. Exclamation point, yeah. Here too, but I was told it's like shouting in English. I don't think so. I really don't think so. That's my perspective. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. To me, it doesn't seem like shouting. It can make it stronger, right? If you want to show that you're shouting in writing, you would definitely use an exclamation point, right? Like if you just put a period, the person's not going to read it in a way that would be shouting. So obviously there's a relation there, but just because you put an exclamation point doesn't necessarily mean that you're shouting. It just makes it stronger. Like I can say something really strong, right? I can say like, if I say go home, go home. It's very firm. My tone is right. Go home. I'm saying like, do this. Like, this is serious. But I'm not shouting. I would most likely put an exclamation point there. You could still put a period there. Depends on like how you want it to be read, maybe. But I think there's a subtle art to it. But I wouldn't worry about it. So I'm going to continue doing posture. Yeah, exactly. I'm glad that you're here. Yes, I am. For the moment. Just trying to catch up. That's all I'm doing. My entire life is just trying to catch up. Which I have to go probably about 1, maybe 1:30 at the latest today. So keep that in mind, guys. We have about 40 minutes, maybe about an hour left. Okay. So yes, welcome, Chiggy. We've lost power in the area for 2 days because of the storm. I saved some battery just enough to watch the show. Oh well. Now that's dedication. That's a fan. Chiggy gets bonus points, bonus fan points. Yes. Although I can't do this in reality on my end, I'm going to honorarily up you to super English hacker, because that's dedication. Very good. Well, I mean, if you need to use the power for other things, I would rather use it for that, but I appreciate it. Yeah. I heard that feeling your articulator touch lightly helps with the placement. Is there any truth to that? So your articulator touch lightly, like there are many articulators. I assume you're talking about the tongue. And then touch lightly, like, okay, well, what sound are we talking about? Like, this is like really, really vague. I have no idea like what specifically you're talking about. If we're just talking about like generally touching things lightly, no. I don't. I mean, maybe I don't think in English we're not super harsh. Like we don't say k, t, but that's maybe more like the force that you push things out with. Like if you can maybe elaborate that a little bit, then I can come back to that, but that doesn't make much sense to me. Where does your tongue stay in the mouth when waking up in the morning? Mine for Japanese touches the upper palate. Yeah, we talked a bit about that in the class. So it's the back and the middle will generally be lower, and the front is just kind of like pinned to the bump there. There's a bit of a range. Some natives are a little different, but I think there's several ultrasounds that show like different natives generally like do that when we're like completely closed up. Is it because of the mouth posture? Your tongue isn't touching the upper palate when you're sleeping. Well, I mean, when I'm sleeping, I don't know what I do, but I do know that if I'm not speech ready, but I'm truly resting, right, where like my mouth is closed, I'm not ready to say anything, I'm just listening to you. What commonly happens is we're up here, so I'm just like there's like a vacuum, just like my tongue is just stuck right there on the bump. And then that's why sometimes I know I mentioned this to you, Chiggy. I don't know if you remember. Pretty sure I mentioned it to you. Sometimes you'll hear natives when they start speaking, they'll be in that true resting position and they'll like peel off of it. And so, especially if it's like a T or an S sound, you might hear. So, like, say you're explaining something to me, like you're my mechanic. I took my car into you. Okay, blah blah blah. And you're like, okay, this is. It's like I say. So, so, so it's like you hear this like little peel off or whatever. That's because I was in that true resting position there. If you listen closely, if you haven't noticed that, you listen closely, you'll start noticing natives do that. I only became aware of that a little while ago. See, I just did right there. Anyway, so Marcos is here. Welcome, Marcos. Glad to see you again. When I pronounce the dark L, I pronounce it like I don't know how to read that. I guess either oo or I'm gonna assume oo, but not rounding my mouth. Eventually, my mouth goes up and make it. Yeah. So the if we're talking about not oo, but like in good book, that sound is kind of close. It's in the same neighborhood as the dark L. Like you have like and ul. So if you're like, say like on the vowel chart, right? So which I don't know if this is flipped. It might be flipped to my camera, but if like it's the front of the mouth, back of the mouth, ul. So there's kind of like you can get this sort of like triangle going. It's on my vowel chart. It's approximate, but they're kind of related in there in some way. So you're probably just like it could be a mouth posture thing. Like maybe if your posture is a bit off, that's going to throw things off because that's going to throw that relationship off a bit. But aside from that, you're probably just getting too close to one of the other sounds. Yeah. Even if it is ooh instead of like you're getting too close to the wrong sound. Yeah. Where can I find Dogen talk about Japanese mouth posture again? Does he have a website or is he doing? I know he has a Patreon, and I think like he has a bunch of things that he has like a full Japanese phonetics course. It's for English speakers learning Japanese, and it's like really, really, really good. Like he's probably, as far as I'm aware, he's like the best source for Japanese pronunciation like on the internet. um, I myself have never actually had his Patreon, but I've seen quite a few of his videos um, in the past. And that particular video, it was posted by somebody else. I was looking for like Japanese mouth posture, and it came up in search results. Um, it wasn't like somebody like reposted his video, which obviously you shouldn't be doing. So it should be in his Patreon for sure. But I kind of like, I don't want to like post the link here because it's like, here's this ripped off video that I'm sharing with you. But I just typed in, I don't know if, I don't think I was on YouTube. I might have been through just regular search, but if you type in like Japanese mouth posture Dogen or something like that, which I assume you already have, but if it doesn't come up, it might have been taken down because I'm sure he probably like tries to get YouTube to take things like that down. And where I saw it might not be available anymore. But if you go through his Patreon and stuff, you should be able to find it. So I don't know. I don't know if he has a website and stuff. So yeah. King Lion says hi to Chiggy. Chiggy says hi to King Lion. We have a side conversation going. It's always good. Dusha is here. Welcome, Dusha. Meadow is here. Welcome, Meadow. Pretty good. Just super busy. Thank you for your corrections and answers. No problem. Meadow. I hear some people say, I have to remember we're doing the parentheses, not quotation marks. Love food in general, but I love seafood the best. Okay. Is it not is it not supposed to be I love it the most? And can we say I hate it the worst by the same logic? Okay. So, well, we're supposed to probably also have a subject. So I love food in general, but I love seafood the best. Yeah. So if you say I love seafood, I can't. My brain doesn't work. I love seafood the most. That sounds a bit more standard. Saying the best is very common. I don't think there's really anything wrong with it. It might be grammatically incorrect, but it's fine. It doesn't sound informal or anything. It's just another way to say it. I love food, and so if I say like I hate food in general, but I hate seafood the worst. Yeah, probably because that doesn't happen as often. Like that phrase doesn't happen as often. It seems a little bit weird, but I think it's okay. If you say I hate food in general, but I hate seafood the most, that definitely sounds perfectly standard and normal. So, I mean, if you want to just use most positive and negative, that's how it's supposed to be. But if you hear somebody say I love seafood the best, it's fine. It's common. You don't have to use it if you don't want to. Just know that people say it. BWBTS. Okay, so back to this. I mean the degree of tension. Okay, and the tongue lifts jaw when speaking with the American accent as opposed to other accents. Okay. So generally keeping things lighter compared to, say, British English, where there might be more tension or something. It's tricky. It's tricky because it's not completely relaxed, right? I like how you said the degree of tension, right? So it's not that there's no tension. It does seem, with few exceptions, there's a couple sounds like the tends to have a bit more tension to it, but overall, the general posture, many of the sounds, especially if we're speaking more lazily, which is like more normal speech, things do seem to be a bit more relaxed. That's a very relative term. Perhaps more open for sure. The top of the throat tends to be more open. We tend to have more space in the mouth. That's definitely true. The lips, I've noticed many working with speakers of different languages on mouth posture. Many languages tend to hold extra tension here on the sides of the lips, where we don't. Like, it's not that we don't have any tension, but it's this, we tend to use the front of our lips much more than the sides of our lips. Even for like PBM, right? So like many languages, they'll just like, the lips will just like ba, ba, or something like that. Where we actually we have this with M, it's a little less because it goes through the nose, but it's like, it's more like it comes like this, p, p, instead of like pa, pa. It's very subtle. It's kind of hard to see, but I feel much more tension on the front of my lips than I do on the sides or the corners of my lips. So to some degree, right, when we're talking about the tension that we're using and stuff, overall, perhaps there's a bit less tension. There's definitely more openness. There's less restriction. But because it's not that there's no tension. It's not that everything is completely relaxed, 100% open. Because if I do that, like if I try to get everything really open and really relaxed, like it's just like, even if I just try to do center of gravity, it just doesn't quite sound right. It sounds like that, like I'm drugged or something, right? So there is tension. We do hold things in place in a certain way, but to some extent, that the tension is less an issue of being relaxed, and it's more an issue of rearranging the way that we're holding the tension. So like in the lips, right, more on the front than on the sides. So anyway, and I'll go ahead and I'll come back to you in a second, Meadow. So the posture itself makes the accent seem relaxed. I would generally say yes. In fact, if how I've started to describe it recently, based on how it feels in my mouth and how the American accent generally sounds, when we do and we get that center of gravity. So I've described it as like, okay, so we know that we have, with the anchor here, the front of the tongue is just kind of like relaxed. We have this groove here in the middle. The sound is in the middle, it's down and then back a little bit. So that we're going to get almost like we're pushing into the back of the tongue, almost like a little chair. And then we go down here. There's this little bit of pressure here holding this open, very, very slight. We tend to be lower in the top of the throat. And so it's almost like the whole accent and the basic posture, the basic anchor and center of gravity and everything. It's like you're like this, right? Like a beanbag chair. I don't know if you've heard of a beanbag chair. You can look that up. If you're not familiar, beanbag chair. It's just like a big chair full of like little beads and stuff. And that is very relaxed. Like you lay in it and it's just like everything just sits back here. Like the whole posture of American English is just like, what's up? We're just chilling, just hanging out, just we're just hanging out, right? So again, not completely relaxed, but it does seem that it's the posture itself. Because if I try to do more of a British accent, which probably isn't going to be perfect, I do know that they speak a bit more from the front of the mouth. American English is a bit more from back here. A lot of the resonance happens back here. But I'm going to probably close my mouth up a bit more. I'm going to try to speak more from here. There's a bit more different tension in the lips. My anchor might be a bit higher, perhaps. And I still do probably definitely have a bit of the American posture still going on. I would not be able to fool a British speaker for sure. But that's my lame British accent. Anyway, the British accent, of course, to a British speaker, it's going to feel relaxed, right? You speaking Spanish or German or whatever that has a different tension in different ways, it's going to feel relaxed to you. But it does seem that the British accent maybe is a bit more forwarded, a bit more tight in a way, a bit more narrow, a bit more controlled or refined. Thank you. That was a good one. Yeah. I think my British accent is getting better now that I kind of know a bit about the posture. Just trying to change the posture a bit immediately helps me sound more British compared to how I used to do it before. But anyway, that's not the point. Okay. So yeah, my answer to that would basically be yes. What percentage of Americans speak Spanish? What percentage of high school students are football fans? Are these two questions right? I mean, the usage of what? Yeah. So this is a very common, normal thing. I'd have to look up and verify if it's grammatically correct, but there's several things that are grammatically correct that nobody uses anymore. This is super, 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 super common, very normal. It's a part of normal speech. Use it. I highly recommend it. Um, there's absolutely no problem with it. Yeah. Okay. Can you please explain the logic of off and down in phrasal verbs to me? I would. You just asked me to explain two of the most difficult, complicated things in my entire preposition book. Um, I'm gonna come back to you in a second because Marcos is leaving. I can't stay any longer as I'm a busy Sunday. I hope things are better for you. Josh, can we be better? Yes. Thank you for stopping by, Marcos. Thank you for the kind words. Hope to see you next week. I'm gonna be busy today as well. I got like a 9-hour shift later. So yeah, have a good week and hopefully I'll see you next time. Back to King Lion. Okay. I'm gonna recommend go read the book if you haven't read the book yet. Um, I wrote the book in a particular order, or I should say, I ordered the book in a particular order, because the problem with down and off is that you have to really understand up and on before you can understand off and down. And there's also sort of a catch-22 to it where in order to like, okay, so up and on are more accessible. Okay, they're sort of the starting point. And then once you have a good idea of that, later in the book, there's off and down. Um, but underneath the surface and the subconscious, up, down, on, off. I think there's another one, but up, down, on, and off. They are so tangled together under the surface that you can't fully understand any one of them without the other three. Um, so up and on aren't too bad. When we get to off and down, that's the off and down are going to give you a better, deeper understanding of up and on, and everything's going to start to click and be like, wow, this is mind blowing. But if we try to jump into off and down before you have a good understanding of up and on, not only is it probably going to be kind of confusing, but it's also um, it's just not very accessible. It's sort of like it's literally like trying to run before you can walk. It's there's a certain order to them. Also, I haven't thought or talked too much about the prepositions in a while, like not in any deep, significant way. So, without looking at my book, which do I have? I don't even have a copy of anymore. I have to get another copy because I gave my copy to my brother. Um, I don't think there's anything meaningful I can say. Like I could easily spend 1 to 2 hours just trying to talk about this, even if I had my book as a guide. Off the top of my head, it's even worse. What I will say, see if I can bring up my map. So there's a map in the book, and I didn't create the map. Literally, I didn't draw it. I had somebody else draw it for me. But when I say I didn't create the map, I mean that I didn't like try to say, oh, this preposition goes here and this preposition goes here. It's like once I got about like halfway to 3/4 of the way through the book, I actually saw, oh, the relationship between the prepositions can be visually represented in a map. So this map is more of a discovery, I would say, rather than like something that I created or came up with. Um, and I'll open this here. Let me share my screen. Okay, share screen, share. This one, that should work. Okay. Yeah. Good. I don't know what's going on down there. Those are other things. Okay. So maybe that'll help. Maybe not. Can I make this bigger? I can. How well can you see that? Hopefully you can see that well enough. This looks complicated. And I mean, we're talking about the relationship between prepositions, which, I mean, the topic itself is complicated by nature, right? So sorry if it's not as super easy as we would all like it to be. Fluent American is here. Welcome, welcome. Like the stream to help it grow. Yeah, definitely. I'm just hanging out at this point. What grows, it grows. Hope you're doing all right, Fluent American. I'm talking about prepositions right now. So basically this, so the core of it, which it looks a little messy now. I have a core map where it's at, on, in. So this at is right. You're at a specific point. On, so that's this part here. It goes up and down, right? And then in would be this, and I call this the cone of existence. And there's a whole like little chapter or appendix in the book that explains all of this, and it's just like it's mind blowing. I'd argue prepositions and articles are the hardest part of English most languages. Probably, yeah. I aim to solve that problem, but yeah, it can only be made so simple. Like it's going to be complicated no matter what. Definitely difficult. But when so the basic relationship of at, on, and in, right? Obviously this is a specific relationship. There's going to be other uses of at, on, and in that don't match this exact schema, but that it will also in some way match up with this, sometimes abstractly. But the basic schema is like, okay, I live at 123 Main Street. I live on Main Street, so it's a little bit bigger. So we're zooming out a bit. That's why we're going from the specific point, zooming out. I live in San Diego. Okay, so at 123 Main Street is in San Diego. On Main Street is in San Diego. So the city level is in, right? And I can continue to zoom out. And it's just in all the way up, right? So I live in the United States, or I live in California. I live in the United States. I live, or now when we get to planets, it's a little weird because you could be on a planet, or we can say in the world, right? So I live in the world. Depends on how you're talking about it. That's why prepositions get tricky, because it depends on how you're talking about things. I live on Earth. Think of it as a surface, but I'm in the world. Anyway, I live in the universe, right? I live in the Milky Way galaxy, so it's in all the way up, because it's just bigger and bigger containers. But the more specific, the more you zoom in, you get to at, right? You pass through on, and you get to at. Okay. Now that also goes the other way. That's why it goes down also. So I can say, okay, so maybe I'm looking at a specific point that's on my hand, right? So the at this point, right, on my hand, because it's the surface. Don't get confused by that. I know that's where it gets a little confused, but I can look at a specific point on my hand, right? Now I can go, if I go into my body, now it's like a magnifying scope. So if we go out to the universe, it gets bigger, bigger, bigger. If we go in with a microscope, it gets bigger downwards, right? Because now if I could shrink myself down and go in somebody's body, well, now that's like a whole other world, right? And I can be at, say, the heart, right? I'm in my little body car driving around somebody's body, and I have to fill it for gas at the heart, right? So it depends on the scope, the lens that you're looking through. Anyway, that's the basic in, on, at. Now on is, I don't even have time for this. Again, go read the book for sure. This is off the top of my head based on what I remember and what I'm trying to think of. I'm horrible thinking of things on the spot. It's all explained in the book, much better than I could do here. But on is always a positive or active state, as I say. So if you have a traffic light, okay, don't think of it as like positive and negative in terms of active. It's like, okay, if you're at a traffic light, the green light is on. If it switches to red, the red light is on. Okay, so it's not positive or negative. It's just which light is on, which line is active, right? Um, yeah, fluent American. I didn't think of it either. I discovered it. That's a whole other story. It's based on my book, The Logic of Prepositions. Um, but anyway, the what was I saying? Yeah, but most of the time, probably like 95% of the time, on it's always a positive or active state. You can always in some way see it that way, but because there's some cases where it doesn't work as a surface or platform, but about 95% of the time or so, it will also be some sort of surface or platform, even if that's an abstract platform. So if I'm on YouTube, that's an abstract platform that we access in order to watch videos and stuff like that. Okay. Of course, I can be, literally on the surface of something. Um, if you're on a stage, that's a surface, but it's also a platform that's raised for the purpose of, acting or music or whatever it is. So very, very often, most of the time, it's going to be a surface or platform. Now you can get off of that surface or platform, right? And that removes you, right? Because out, remember, this is the cone of existence. So at the largest scale, right? The universe, all of existence, in existence, right? Let's say I have a candle. Okay. So I have a candle and I light the candle. Okay. So then so the candle is burning. We can say it's existing, it's in existence, right? Now, if I blow the candle out, phrasal verb, okay, this is why phrasal verbs work. If I blow the candle out, the fire goes out of existence. It's no longer in existence. Okay. Now we don't put the candle in fire because that would literally be putting the candle inside of fire. So that would be a different meaning. So the opposites, what you would think would be the direct opposites, they don't always work. And sometimes the opposite of in is not out and the opposite of out is not in. It depends on the exact context. Again, that's all in my book. I'm horrible thinking of examples, but I tried to put examples like that in the book. So anyway, point is fire out is no longer existing. Okay, so it goes out of existence. Okay, it's no longer in the cone of existence. So when we're on to off, right? On to off, either way, it doesn't matter. So if I'm on stage, now I'm off stage. Okay. Now this doesn't mean that I'm out of existence, obviously, but my existence is no longer on the stage. Okay. So I was existing on the stage, on the platform. I get off the stage. My existence is no longer on the stage. I'm no longer there. I'm no longer actively existing there. My mode of active existence is now off the stage. That's a very physical example. It seems kind of weird in that sense, but it works. Turning the light on and off. Okay, if it's on, the light is working. It's shining out into existence. If I turn the light off, right, the light bulb is still there, but it's no longer active. It's not in an active, positive or active state anymore. Okay. Again, this gets very abstract sometimes, but basic explanation. Now up. Okay. So very simple physical example. If I'm off stage, right? Remember, surface or platform. So if I'm off stage, I get up onto the stage. Okay. So on stage, off stage, up onto the stage. My existence is back over here. I cannot explain this anywhere near as good as I did in the book. In fact, I feel like I'm doing such a poor job of trying to explain this right now that it's making it look worse than it is. Anyway, check out the book. If you're curious, go check out the book. If you think it's a bunch of nonsense, then I don't care. I'll close that. Hey, that automatically stopped sharing. That's cool. I didn't know that works. I have to catch up. I'm running out of time. Anyway, to tie this up really quick and move on, check out the book. I will say that etymologically, I think it's an Old English. I have this in the book too. Down. It was down. Down or off. I'm pretty sure it's down. Yeah, down. This is why you have to understand up, on, and off, or at least up and on to get down. Etymologically, down comes from the Old English. I think it's like ofduna or something like that, which literally means like from the hill or of the hill. And so there's this relationship. Like if I walk up to somebody, I'm getting closer to them. Okay. If uh, I can walk up the hall, which sounds like I'm emphasizing that, like I'm emphasizing me getting closer to something. I can also walk down the hall, which sounds like I'm emphasizing. Emphasize is not the best word here, but it's sort of the way the perspective we're looking at it from. If I say I walk down the hall, it feels like I'm talking about from this point away from that point. Or if I say I'm walking up the hall, it feels like I'm walking towards this point. It's the same thing. They mean the same thing. If you say I'm walking up the hall, I'm walking down the hall, I'm walking up the street, I'm walking down the street, the meaning is the same, but there's a little bit of a subtle difference in the way that the speaker is thinking and perceiving it. So it's all connected. It's all connected to the service. Where's the book? Book is on Amazon. There should be a link in the description to my Amazon stuff. But yes, okay. I got that one. Got that one. Question. Okay. All phrasal verbs, particles have metaphorical or idiomatic meaning. It's a little bit of a confusing question. So I think you mean like if we use like the say like verb plus on or verb like whatever, like the piece that goes with the verb, right? My definition of a phrasal verb is that there has to be a change in meaning. So just because like if you go online, I'm pretty sure like think about is listed as a phrasal verb. I don't count that as a phrasal verb. Okay, because there's no different. About just goes with think, right? Now there's other things that can go with think, yes, but about just goes with think. If I look at is just the basic preposition that goes with look. It's not a phrasal verb. But if I say look, now if I say look into, meaning look into a box, I don't count that as a phrasal verb. But if I say look into, meaning look into some problem that needs to be solved, I would count that as a phrasal verb because it's more abstract. We're sort of getting like a special new meaning out of it. Or especially a case like move on, meaning move forward. So we're going to move on to the next topic. We're going to move forward. We're going to leave this topic, move on to the next topic. We're on that active topic. We're going to leave it, get off of it, and move on to a new topic. So that goes back to that map, right? Get down off of this one, up onto that one. Does it matter at the end of the day? Not really. It's a way that I like to classify it that seems to help people think about the prepositions and the phrasal verbs. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. Things go together. The meaning that results is the meaning that results. That's all tied to the logic and the subconscious connections under the surface. I was watching a video about improving pronunciation, accent, and the man. Let's say the main. The man in the video said two things. The first one, you have to listen like a native before you can speak like a native. There's another one. Oh, okay, the second thing. If you are trying to produce a difficult sound to you, it has to hurt your tongue. It is like lifting weight. What do you think about that? Okay, so for the first point, you have to listen like a native before you can speak like a native. I would generally agree with that. I can imagine that he's talking about either ear training and or getting lots of input to like hear the way that natives actually speak instead of just like learning a bunch of words. Either way, 100% agree. You have to get lots of input. You have to train your ears. If you really want to hear the stress, the rhythm, the difference between E and E, you want to hear that how the mouth posture affects things, which is really subtle, or some details are really subtle and can be hard to hear. You might not be aware of them. Like there's things about Spanish that like I can understand Spanish. Like I know what Spanish sounds like, but now that I'm trying to get the Spanish posture, there's subtle little details that I never noticed about the sound of the Spanish language. And I'm like, oh, this is interesting. And I'm able to kind of like sort of mimic that a little bit. So it was that little pull off from the top of my mouth there. Anyway, so yes, generally yes. Now I don't know the rest of the context or whatever he was saying. So, but just based on that statement, yes, I agree with that person. This one, if you're trying to produce a difficult sound, it has to hurt your tongue. It doesn't have to. Okay. But when you are learning new sounds, if your tongue hurts, that's usually something that you want. I mean, you don't want to don't like push yourself, especially if it's in the throat. Don't like push yourself to where like you go hoarse, like you lose your voice or something like that. It's gonna be whatever. But in general, yes, that's a good sign. that shows, because there's probably going to be certain sounds, or the way that certain sounds are made in a new language, that your tongue is not used to, that's never had to do before, right? So it's just like if you never work out and then all of a sudden you go to the gym and you lift a bunch of weights, the next day you're going to be sore, you're going to hurt a lot because your muscles aren't used to doing that, right? um, so I wouldn't make a blanket statement and say like, oh, every new sound is going to make your tongue hurt. But if you never feel your tongue hurt when you're trying to learn a pronunciation of a new language, that's probably not a good sign. Probably means that you're not doing things right. It depends. The mouth posture can go a long way to reduce that, because once you get the posture right, a lot of things kind of get into place. So it could also be that maybe if you have the wrong posture and you're trying to do a certain sound and your tongue hurts, maybe it hurts because you're actually in the wrong place and you're trying to do it in a way that isn't right. So just because the tongue hurts doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing things right, but it is generally a good sign. Yes. So I think I saw it in one of your videos about prepositions. Not sure though. I don't know if that's really okay. Well, that's probably related to the other one. Blah blah blah. Prepositions. More side conversations. Finished teaching. Yay! Always good to be at the end of the day. My day is literally just starting. I have a 9-hour shift ahead of me. I've never thought of mapping prepositions. Oh yeah, where is that one? Very, very unrelated. So handle when if you can, but could you explain the story behind the Viking helmet in the back? Oh yeah, you can see that. So well, actually, it's I have like one short buried somewhere in my channel at this point, and I made maybe like 4 months ago. It's part of a costume for a character that I was going to have on the channel. I still might, but I mean, I'm not even making videos at this point because I have to work too much. But that aside, the character's name is Dagger, and he has a Viking helmet. He has like this tunic. The Viking, they all represent different things. So there's the tunic, the Viking helmet, a monocle, a sash that says Magnum Cum Laude. I think that's a yeah, and each thing represents a different aspect of the English language or the history of the English language. So the tunic obviously it represents Middle English. The sash represents the influence of Latin and French on the language. The monocle represents modern English, and maybe a bit of like British sophistication, type of idea. And then the Viking hat represents Old English and the influence of Old Norse on the development of the language. My original idea that I was going to run with, I think it was better, but being in a very PC world these days, I was kind of like, this probably wouldn't come across the way I intend it. And the character still can come across wrong, but my original idea was like Old English, right? Probably had like a lot of harsh sounds and, very, complicated grammar, kind of like modern German and things like that, with all these cases and stuff. And, we think of it stereotypically like barbarians are stupid, not saying Old English speakers were stupid, but as a stereotype, right? And so it's like, over time, right, French and Latin sort of like refined the language. And so now you have like this smart, sophisticated barbarian, right? And that represents the English language because it's like this hybrid, and it goes from Old English all the way through modern English. Obviously a joke character, it's very abstract, but then I got the idea. I was like, wait, I probably shouldn't do this because I'm saying, okay, there's a barbarian, sophisticated barbarian, and then like the history of imperialism with like Western culture and particularly like the British and America and stuff. I was like, this is probably going to come across wrong. So my original idea from the character, I toned back a bit, but I kept a lot of the basic elements. And yeah, but that's why I got the Viking hat, because it's supposed to be for the costume. So you might see more of that later at some point. Thanks so much. Welcome. Hurt tongue. Oh wow. Can we say his vocabulary is huge or weak? Strong. What? Okay, so his vocabulary is huge. Yeah, that works. His vocabulary is weak. Yeah, his vocabulary is strong. Yeah. We talk about a big vocabulary, a huge vocabulary. Those words work. You could have a strong vocabulary. I mean, that sounds fine to me. So like your word base is strong, right? But I think like a word like big or huge would be, I don't know, it both sound perfectly fine, but like if you're gonna pick one to go with by default, it would probably be like huge. Yeah. But we could talk about like, because when we talk about skills, right, his speaking skills are weak, his speaking skills are strong. We don't say his speaking skills are big or huge or something. That'd be a different thing, but or that wouldn't mean anything. But when we're talking about skills in general, we say weak or strong. So here it's vocabulary, it's more knowledge than skill, but that's probably why weak and strong also work. And then our shift premiums actually restaurant days. Well, I'm basically the same thing, except I'm not in the restaurant. I'm going between the restaurants. Yeah. Life sucks right now, but that's okay. How is that not your profile picture? Yeah, I know, right? I actually had one of my students who's an artist. I had him draw up a. I can show you guys if I can find it. Like a little concept, just like cartoonish type of image, very plain. And I was like early on when I first started the channel, I was like, I should make this the profile picture, but then I was like, eh. Let's see if it's gonna be on the computer and not on my flash drive. It should be. Nope. Yeah. I just have like my computer hard drive is just a mess. Like so many folders everywhere. I haven't done any cleaning of that in a while. Yeah, I'm not sure where it is. It's probably on my flash drive somewhere, or my external hard drive. So, oh well. But yeah. Well, I'm gonna have to go. If not now, then pretty soon. This is about the time I wanted to end, and it looks like I finally caught up. Yay! So if anybody has any last minute questions, feel free to ask before I go. The original idea sounds much cooler. Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's essentially the same. I assume we're talking about the Viking guy. It's essentially the same character. I forget what I changed. Oh yeah, originally he had a graduation cap hanging off the horn, and he didn't have the monocle. And I think, oh yeah, that's what I did. I added the monocle. I got rid of the graduation cap because I thought it was lame, but I added the monocle to make him a little cartoony, like even though I'm dressed up, like because I feel like if I make it very, very clear, like obviously I can't please everybody, but at the same time, like I don't want to necessarily deliberately be like insensitive because like history of imperialism is not okay. It's not cool. But anyway, I feel if I can make him sort of like a joke character, kind of cartoony, kind of like, whatever, do like some funny skits with him and stuff, that most people will, interpret it that way and not be like, hey, this is a symbol of blah, 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 blah. So yeah, it should be fine. But that is on the side right now. Is it a slap on in the face? It's a good question. It's a very good question, right? This actually goes directly back to the logic of preposition. So on, right, you would think, well, it's the surface. I'm hitting the face, right? And if you were talking about the surface itself, right, then on, it does work, right? Like there's something on my face, right? I put my hand on my face. It's not in my face, right? But we have a special thing that if there's an object that hits part of your body, say slap in the face, the ball hit me in my leg, okay, not on my leg, or you could maybe say on my leg, but in my leg, it's because there's force. I talk about this actually in I'm pretty sure it's in a little bit in the on lesson, the video that I have here somewhere buried in one of those lessons, for the logical preposition videos. But if we're just talking about the body as a surface, then on is what we say. If you're talking about inside the body, like my heart is inside my body, then we would use in, right? But when there's force, so like a ball hits you in the leg, in the chest, somebody slaps you in the face, okay, you got hit in the head, right? It's because of that force that it's like it's trying to go in, right? It's causing some sort of I mean, it's not like my face just like like you go into my face or something like that, but like the force goes into my face, right? And so it's how English looks at it. It's how the English language perceives that relationship of that forceful hitting of something on your body. We use in instead of on. But it also depends on how you're talking about it. That's the other important thing. It depends on how you're talking about it. That is the big key. So I can maybe flip that and say, when he slapped me in the face, let's say he had a ring on or something, right? We say his ring landed on my jawbone. Okay. So even though it's still a hit, it's still a slap, there's still that force. What I'm talking about is, okay, this landed on this. That's where it hit, right? So it depends on how you're talking about it. It's not a blanket like, oh, just because this, I always use in. It's like, well, if that's what you're expressing, yes, but depends on exactly what you're expressing. Okay. Take it easy. I hope it goes smoothly. Yeah, me too. It's relatively short term, at least for the next 2 months, probably 5. Long story, won't go into the details, but I'm adapting. This week I've had to adapt. I was just like dead this week. Pulled a 12-hour shift yesterday, almost. So it is what it is. Maybe trying to hold the tongue anchored for the posture is overcomplicating things. Sounds like the brace is best used to snap in the posture, but it can't solve the problem of holding it throughout. Well, that doesn't make any sense, because the anchor is the posture. There's the center of gravity, which is the first part of the posture I discovered that I was talking about, and that's part of the posture. But you don't have an anchor, you don't have a posture. I haven't made videos about the anchor yet. So it's not overcomplicating things. In fact, it simplifies things, because if you don't, the reason why the anchor exists is because when you're learning how to speak your native language, like the brain only has so many resources and there's so many sounds, so many ways that your mouth can move. So it seems that every language / dialect, because it can vary maybe from dialect to dialect, but every language for sure has some part. Maybe in French, apparently it's up here, right in here. That's where they anchor. In English, it's here, on the top teeth with the sides. But every language seems to have some sort of physical anchor between the tongue and the mouth. And it's not, the trick is you're not trying to hold it there. Like if I try to really rigidly hold this anchor here like this, it restricts certain sounds and it gives this sort of restricted sound to my voice. It doesn't work this way. Okay. It needs room to move and to breathe, but generally speaking, throughout most of my speech, most of the time, I can feel some form of contact with the upper teeth here. Fluent American gave me a super sticker. Now I feel bad. I definitely have to go watch your stream next Saturday. I probably won't be around to watch it though, because I'm gonna be working, but I appreciate it. Yeah. Put that up on the board here really quick. Super sticker. Thank you. Yeah. But anyway, things are just kind of a mess right now. My classes have been slow and this and that, whatever. I got to do what I got to do to survive in the short term, because I have like some debts and stuff. And as I said, I'm not going to go into the whole thing, but yeah, if I can actually complete the mouth posture course, I'll have like a really good, solid virtually guaranteed product that I can start like marketing and stuff. But until then, like I don't have a whole lot other than my books. So it's like trying to make videos is not paying enough right now. So I need to make money. I definitely appreciate it. If I have any opportunities coming up, I'll keep posting. Okay, appreciate that. But anyway, back to here. Yeah. Anyway, the main thing is you don't want to hold it super rigidly, but it's called an anchor for a reason, right? The difficult thing that I'm experiencing in Spanish and that all of my students are experiencing going into English is how to hold it. Because your native language has an anchor. You may not be aware of it, but if you sort of pay attention and you figure out what that anchor is, then you probably notice that when you're speaking English, if you try to get the English anchor, your tongue probably naturally wants to go back to your native anchor. And that's one of the problems I'm trying to figure out how to solve. I have some ideas. I already have some things that are helping with it. And I have some ideas on how to work around that. But as I said, classes have been slow. And so it's like I get some people who join the course and then after a few classes, they just disappear, right? That happens. And then I have some people who like pretty much everybody I'm working with right now is at most taking one lesson a week, which is like bare minimum to see progress. And I mean, like, I get it. People have their time and their money and, whatever. But because of that, that's also slowing down the course progress. And so like my leading edge students are like only so far. And it's like, I need to test this so I can put my approval on it and, all this stuff. And the results are coming through, but it's just like nobody's gotten to the end. So that's the hard part right now. And trying to like figure out like how to get around these problems of like being able to hold it. Like, unless I'm playing with it myself in Spanish, which helps me a little bit, I can only do so much because I'm only seeing people every so often. So it's slow. Thanks a lot. No problem. I wish you the best. If I became rich in the next 5 years, well, thank you. That'd be cool. Yeah, go see the pyramids. I always wanted to see the pyramids. I'll go to Egypt someday, eventually. Let's see. Blah 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 blah. Okay, so I'm definitely gonna have to go here in a minute. But so can we say he kicked the ball in his back or in his belly? There we would say into, because we're saying he kicked something into something else. If you could say the ball hit him in his back, that would be fine. But he kicked the ball in his back. Can we drop the two? Often we could drop the two. He kicked the ball in his back. It seems a bit much here to drop the two. It's probably because because we're adding that extra piece. Because like you can kick someone, I can kick him in the back. The ball can hit him in the back. Now, if I kick him in the back, that's not the ball. It's just my foot. But here I'm saying I kicked the ball, and the ball went into his back, right? And so that's the relationship. So in is still working there, but dropping the two part here seems a bit weird to me. Or he shot him in the head. Yes, that's a perfectly normal standard expression. Yes. It'd be like you can shoot someone in the foot. We would use in. Yeah, we shoot in body part. Anyway, we're getting a little leaving the PG here. Okay, so I'm gonna go, guys. Thank you guys very much. Appreciate it. Can't make any promises on content. I am working on things behind the scenes, I'm thinking about the channel, thinking about posture, continue to explore things. Things are just very slow right now. And I have to put in so many hours right now with my other job that it is what it is. We're in a slow time. So be patient. As I said before, because I'm not really actively posting content right now, anybody who is a member who would like to temporarily drop their membership, I completely understand and makes perfect sense to me. But you can always come back later. If you decide to continue, despite the fact that I'm not posting much, I definitely appreciate it. Thank you very much. I will definitely be back at some point for sure. But other than that, we will be here next week for the live stream. Again, I will continue live streams for sure. And hope everybody has a great week. Thanks again, Fluent American. Yeah, we'll see you next time. Bye. Bye, King Lion. Okay, and takes a second.